Some places feel like they've been waiting for you. But long before we ever moved in, I dreamed of a house that already felt familiar. Someplace with a river beside it, and trees whispering above the roof. The kind of whisper that sounds almost like a memory, one that you can't quite place. If time isn't linear, then sometimes I wonder if certain places remember us before we even arrive. I'm often asked, how did you find this place? And the truth is, I had a dream before I ever saw this house. So for today's video, I'd like to tell you the dream about how I found this house. I'll also share with you the history I know about this house. It's strange, really, how sometimes you can recognize a place you've never been, but that is how our story begins. So it is a rainy October day, and I can think of no better way to spend it than telling you the true story, slightly supernatural story, of how I came to live in this house. Did I find this house in a dream? Absolutely. No clickbait. That is a true story. One night, I had this dream. I was driving in the car with my husband. We were in a black sports car with a sunroof. We passed under a stone bridge, and we passed a driveway with these pillars. And I said, whoa, stop, I've been there before. So the two of us get out and we walk through the pillars, and on the right-hand side is this smaller house. And in my head, I knew that this smaller house was for animals. In front of us is a much bigger house. And I remember in the dream, I thought to myself, oh, it was built in the 50s or the 60s, even though it looked like a very, very old house. On the lawn in front of the house were animals. They were dressed in like top hats and tails. They were wearing very human clothes. It's a dream, so just go with it. Anyway, I decide to go and explore. On the right-hand side of the house, there is a river. I walk down the river, I walk down these steps, and I meet this very, very old man there. In my head, in the dream, I knew him. The weird thing about him was he had horns on his head. But that didn't detract from him. It was just kind of, I understood that that was just him. Anyway, he said to me, have you been to the Church of the Trees yet? And I looked at him and I said, no, but we're going soon. And that was kind of the end of the conversation. And I looked down the river towards where I knew to be the Church of the Trees. I come back around to the front of the house. My husband is there. And I said, oh, I just met so-and-so, but I cannot think of his name right now. Anyway, we go on to explore. And on the other side of the house is this small forest with a much, much smaller river. Anyway, that was the gist of the dream. But at one point in the dream, I remember running my hands along a stone wall. And I said out loud in the dream, this feels real. And it felt so real. When I woke up, I wrote the dream down. I'd written dreams down before, but not regularly. It's not something I normally do. So my husband has been kind of used to these kind of witchy things, odd witchy things happening to me every once in a while. He goes, well, let's go and look at a few houses in Scotland if you're having a dream. And I said, that's a great idea. So we found a house that we wanted to come see, and he organized it. He booked the hotel, he booked the car, but he did it all through a travel agency. So he didn't book anything himself. So it's the day before we leave, and he goes, oh, we're staying at this and this hotel. And I said, what hotel? So he told me the name of the hotel again. And at this hotel, the only hotel in Scotland, there is a cathedral of trees. And I had looked it up because a church of trees isn't something you really think about. And the old man had asked me, are you going to the Church of the Trees? So my husband was like, whoa, that is really freaky. Our flight is delayed. We land, it's late, it's raining when we get to Glasgow. And we go to pick up the hire car. And while we're walking out of the airport to the hire car, I go, wouldn't it be strange if we have a black sports car? Now, because we had used this company before for booking cars, they usually gave us a family car because we have 2 kids. We did not get a family car. We, in fact, got the black sports car with the lights inside, like in the dream, and a sunroof. To the hotel, a fabulous place. The next morning, my husband goes, oh, I actually just got a response from another realtor. He said we could go see this house this morning before we go see the other house. And I said, great, which one is it? And he was like, I don't know, I just asked for other houses in the area. So we drive around and we see it from across the lock. And I go, wow, that looks familiar. We drive up and there are 2 stone pillars right in the driveway. And I literally put my hand on my husband's chest and I was like, oh my God. And then when we turn in, there is the little boathouse that you see in some of my videos and the little bird on the other side. And I was like, no, this can't be the house. But everything has happened by chance. I had not put any effort into finding this house. We were shown around not by the realtor, but actually by our neighbor, because no one really comes out this far. Anyway, we get to the top of the stairs, and no lie, on one of the curtains, there are animals dressed up in people clothing, wearing top hats and tails. And we left, and my husband was like, well, it does tick all the boxes, but I don't know. We go see the other house. He liked that one. That one was a huge no for me. The next morning we were supposed to leave, and I said, let's just drive out one more time. We drive by the house, we park, and we walk along the street. He was like, yeah, this place is really beautiful. This could be the house. So not only did I have a dream about this house, but by strange coincidences and fate, this is actually the very first house we saw in Scotland. And we bought it. So I suppose you would like to know a little bit of the history of the house, so I'll tell you what I know.
The first thing to note is that we're essentially dealing with 2 different buildings. This is the original part of the house, which was built in 1750. The extension of the big room and some of the bedrooms upstairs was built in 1850 for a wedding. And while building what is essentially another house sounds extravagant, when you live out this far, especially 200 years ago, you had to have enough space for your guests. This is inside the big room, and if you've seen any of my other videos, you know that it's still an ongoing work in progress. I'm in the middle of stripping back the original Victorian bookcases. But what I really wanted to show you was how thick the original walls are. Could you imagine the amount of work it must have taken to chisel this doorway 200 years ago? The 2 buildings join in the downstairs entrance hall, which still has the original ceiling plaster arches and the original woodwork. And if I'm being honest, probably the original wall sconces whenever they were put in. That French door leads out to an area which we just lovingly call the Victorian boot room. This was probably built to replace a previous entrance and add the addition of a water closet. As far as original features go, the dining room is really where it's at. There's only one historically listed feature in this house, and it is this amazing Gothic archway. Can you imagine the time, patience, and skill it must have taken in order to create this 300 years ago? But those are the historical features. Here's the history. Robert Louis Stevenson wrote a very famous book called Kidnapped.
So here's the historical tea, as I know it. Supposedly, Robert Louis Stevenson stayed in this house when he wrote Kidnapped. Now, Kidnapped was based on a very famous actual murder in Scotland. Campbell Laird was assassinated by the Stuart family. Now, the Campbells were loyal to the English crown. The Stuarts were Jacobites, or they supported Scottish independence. This house was a Campbell house. It was built for, I believe, the second son of a Campbell laird. Now, the older son had a much bigger house built up the glen for him, and he was the one who was assassinated. So supposedly the assassination plot was either going to be for the laird of this house or the older brother. Nobody really knows who actually killed the Campbell laird. A member of the Stuart family was executed. However, it was very kind of widely known that he was framed. So this particular area was quite the precarious pinnacle of Scottish history. Did Robert Louis Stevenson actually stay here when he wrote the book? I have no idea. The locals say he did. It's a lovely thought. He would have no better location to write a beautiful murder mystery. So the question everybody wants to know right now is, do we have ghosts? And probably, as someone who's very attuned to things, all I can say is that this house has a very warm, safe, and inviting feeling. Clearly the people who lived here before loved this place, and that just kind of radiates through the walls. That being said, I have had a couple of, oh, that's a bit strange moments. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I have the most lovely little cat called Princess Donut. Now, in the evenings, she hops up on the bed and she sleeps where she likes right next to me. But there have been a few times where I could have sworn it was Princess Donut walking over me on the bed, and there was nothing there. So clearly there have been other animals in this house who have liked to curl up next to someone. By far the strangest thing that has ever happened to me was I was just about to hang a piece of artwork. I was just about to put the nail in the wall and the doorbell rang. I went to the door, no one was there. Now I was just down the hall from the door, so there was no time for somebody to speed off in a car. Even if there was, I would have seen the car speeding off down the driveway. There was no one around. I did think, oh, well, maybe it was just like an electrical fault with the doorbell, right? I checked it, it was plugged in, it was fine. But strange thing, I wound up hanging the pictures in a different place. Now, if you remember in the beginning of the video, I said that I thought that the house was built in the 50s or the 60s. There was no way I could have known that this house was built in 1750. I'd never seen the house before. So it's strange that I knew what decade it had been in, but I got the century wrong. Another thing about the dream is when we went to go look in the boathouse, remember I had written down in the dream that it was a house for animals. So we open the door to the boathouse and a baby bat falls down. No lie. Bats, of course, are protected. So I went and I got a big leaf and I scooped up the baby bat and I put it back inside and we just gently closed the door again. So there you have it. That is the very true story of how we came to live in this house through a dream I had. I had that dream in September. We then flew out in October to go see the other house and just happened to stumble upon this house, and it was the first house we saw in Scotland. So now you know about the dream, and you've seen some of the historical features of the house, and you know about as much history as I do about this house. How's that for a spooky October day?